Uh, as you know, there's a lot of controversy regarding uh, this coronavirus, and I don't think the answers are in, but I want to share information that some of it is actionable, and I highly recommend doing your own research and proving it to your own satisfaction. Because, as the disclaimer has been given, I'm not trying to treat anybody except my own personal patients, and this isn't an effort, but it's an educational tool. Um, Sharing information, as you may or may not know, is the best way actually for you to learn, is to share what you know with someone else. And this is something that we recommend all through training and school. And so a lot of times it appears as if I am doing the teaching, but actually it's something else doing the teaching, and I'm just a participant just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I believe the prayer already outlined that, so I won't have to go into that detail. If somebody knows, because I'm not familiar, I just want to make this fill the whole screen. And I'm at a
Are you in PowerPoint? So go to View.
Well, I tried a Google document, so that was
then go to View then. You should be able to go to View. And you want to go to full screen.
Oh, here it is. Right. But it's
still have those information on the side, but it is bigger. It is a little bigger.
Bigger, okay. Because it'll be important when we get to some of the other slides.
Okay.
But we can share it. I don't have that many slides because I really wanted to do more discussion than, a lecture. And I assume everybody has an interest in trying to avoid COVID-19. And as an aside, I am a researcher, so I am conducting a study. Official term is principal investigator on preventing COVID-19. So we take individuals who are healthcare, doctors, nurses, medical assistants, firemen, paramedics, who have been exposed, and they can join the study. The study will allow you to either get the placebo, which is a pill that's inert, versus the study drug, which is called NTZ. I'm not trying to really talk about the study or recruit people for it, but it's important, I think, to understand that there are studies being done to try to see what can help. And NTZ is a drug used for protozoa infections that would cause diarrhea. So it's been used for years. So it appears to be safe because you have years and years of people using it and no bad side effects, as opposed to the vaccines, which no one has had it, and we're not going to know until, it's given out. So that's the question mark I put behind the vaccines. I'm also doing a study on recurrent yeast infection, and there are two proposals for me to do the study for vaccines. I'll get into that at a later time, but I study it thoroughly before I make a decision to participate or not, because I'm not subjecting my patients or anybody else to something that I think is not safe. So having said that, the question is, what's the number one hormonal deficiency in the world, and why are COVID-19 deaths associated with it or linked to it? What you don't see is, I'm not saying it's caused by it. I want to make that distinction, okay? I thought of this example, and you guys can give me feedback that it helps or it doesn't help. But as you know, or may know, there was a storm in Illinois. And as I drove to different hospitals and so forth to do surgery this morning and see patients at the office, there are a tremendous number of limbs down. And if you look carefully, some of the limbs you could tell were rotten in the middle. And then some of the limbs look like the tree looked fine. It was just a smaller limb. My assumption is the wind was so strong, it tore it off, but it was normal. So there is a difference I can notice between the limbs that were torn off that were very large, and in the middle it was like hollow or black. And I say that to say that's a good natural example of a pre-existing condition. So when we talk about vitamin D and COVID-19, it's something that happens, but the effects on people is different depending on what's within. And so I like to tell my patients, and I get in trouble, so it's okay, that they spend a lot of money cleaning up the outside of the cup, but their concern needs to be in the inside. To that extent, I recommend we have to do tests, blood tests, to check what's going on inside, because just because a person looks okay on the outside, half of the people that die from heart attacks look fine the week before. Because if you looked on the inside, you would find their arteries are damaged. And so here we go into the discourse. One thing that needs to be addressed is the question is, what is a cytokine storm? I put this on the slide to preface my remarks that, in my opinion, nobody ever dies just from the virus. Well, what do I mean by that? When you look at the cause of death, it's a tremendous amount of inflammation and release of cytokines, which is a protein, and they're inflammatory factors and anti-inflammatory factors. They're always to be balanced. And the best example I could give you is, or one of the examples is, if you cut your hand, you expect there to be inflammation, and you kind of expect with your life experience that after about a week, there'll be a scab, it'll be healed over, and any swelling or pain will go away. So the inflammation served this purpose for a week. That's acute inflammation. But if it stayed inflamed for not just weeks or months, but years, that is the tremendous cause of tremendous problems. And we then label those problems later as heart disease, kidney disease, et cetera, et cetera. But inflammation was the beginning. So leading back to why is inflammation there? Well, let's look at this study. And if you get the slides, you'll be able to click on it, I believe. Maybe not. We're supposed to open up the, there we go. So it should direct you to the link. So this is in PubMed, a government database journal, actually Indian Journal of Community Medicine. This is 2015.
Excuse me,
Yes.
you can go to view and below that there's a zoom. You can click on that and see whether you can make it bigger.
You're talking about in Zoom itself, right?
No, you went for full screen.
Yeah, if once you have the document up, Dr. Thomas, if you hit Control and the plus sign on your keyboard, it'll automatically increase it. Control minus will make it smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, for our purposes, I'm not going to try to read the document, but I just want you to see in 2015, it was already a discussion about vitamin D deficiency. Is the pandemic for real? And the point I'm making is the underlying problem has not been addressed. There's another one, which I'll go to, I believe, it might be 2008. This one's 2018 also. But the point of it is that these pre-existing problems have not been addressed. And the individuals, I'll use Chicago example. I don't know if any you are aware that in Chicago, the African-American population is about 13% of the Chicago population, right? Is that something that's well known? Uh-oh. Can anybody hear me?
We hear you, Doc.
Okay.
We probably just don't know the statistics.
Well, the other part of statistics is in Chicago, the death rate of African Americans is 60%. 13% of the population, 60% of the deaths. It's a huge difference. So, what I want to bring your attention is that this is controversial to one extent. Nope, that's going the wrong way. It's controversial to one extent because some of the links is their connection, and they say no. Then most of the others say yes. And the basic fact is the cytokine storm can severely damage the lungs and lead to what's causing death, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and death in patients. That's when they put them on a ventilator, right? And that seems to kill the majority of the patients, not the destruction of the lungs by the virus itself. It's a complication from dysfunction, mismatch, out of balance immune system. And that's where vitamin D comes in because it enhances your innate immune system. The innate one is ready to respond and doesn't need to have a history of it and prevents the immune system from overreacting. So this is important because 2014, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it's a fact that the Ebola virus struck in Africa, and it was like almost or 100% deaths if you got that infection. When it came here, the death rate was nowhere close to that, less than 10%. The difference is in Africa, those individuals have parasites. For an example, malaria is endemic almost everywhere. Also, having pinworms or other kind of worms and parasites is all over Africa. So their immune system is out of balance and is ready to misdirect and overcome the lungs simply because of that. On the other hand, if you live near the equator, you should have, the assumption is, enough vitamin D, but vitamin D cannot prevent an overactive immune system when it's been charged up by parasites. So you have a dilemma, and when they do the studies, they're looking at a tremendously low dose, and so it's not really an adequate study. And this, again, I'll try this. Okay. And while the screen is coming up, are there any questions so far, or can I clarify anything?
So what you're saying essentially is that underlying causes need, underlying health issues need to be considered when presenting data regarding any of these illnesses.
Yeah.
Okay.
And these researchers at Northwestern, right down the road a piece, analyzed data from 10 countries, and their team found low vitamin D and hyperactive immune system. And they're basically saying the same thing as the previous study. It strengthens innate immunity and prevents overactive immune system, and could explain several mysteries, including why children are less likely to die. And since you had that link, this information, can be evaluated. And some of it, I'm just going to go to a larger screen. It could cut mortality in half, according to Beckman. It's not preventing a patient from contracting the virus, but it may reduce complications and prevent death. So I'm gonna pause here and say to my patients, I explained to them that over the last 10 years, the vitamin D level of my patients, the average is 17. And in the studies, there are three groups of people that didn't do well. Those who died, those who were sick and in the hospital, and those who were sick, pretty sick at home. All three of them, their average vitamin D level was 20 or less. My average patient in the last 10 years, testing people randomly that come to the practice, the average level was 17. So a whole nother lecture or discussion could be around the fact that African Americans have the highest death rate from breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer. They have the most multiple sclerosis. They have the most lupus, sarcoid, asthma. It's a huge, huge problem when the immune system is out of balance. And that's what happens when you don't get enough sun. So the take-home message is you have to either get enough sun to get vitamin D and get tested so you know it, or you have to take a supplement. And those who live above the 33rd parallel, which is, let's say, Atlanta, San Diego, do not get any vitamin D 6 months of the year because the rays of the sun do not reach the surface of the earth in Chicago or pretty much anything north of the third parallel or south of it for that matter. But in North America, the majority of North America is in the zone where it's not getting vitamin D. And that is a huge problem that is being ignored. The first paper was 2008, and we still have that as an issue. As I said earlier, patients with COVID requiring ICU admissions are more likely to have that deficiency. And the vitamin D receptor is in the B and T lymphocytes, suggesting a role in how this balances or modulates the innate and adaptive system, immune system. So it's two parts of the immune system. Innate is what's set up. We can even say your skin is part of the innate system because it's a barrier. Certain cells are barrier B cells that are ready to attack, and they have what they call PAMPs, PAMPS, and DAMP. So without getting into the detail, they're pattern recognition. So just like I'm sure those who have Facebook know that your face can be recognized, and I think your friends will recognize their face and suggest who's in the pictures. Well, that's nothing compared to how your body's immune system can recognize pathogens or damage tissue and seek out to remove it so it doesn't harm you. From my point of view, there's no benefit of being deficient in vitamin D, none whatsoever. So while there's an argument about how much you need, I use the example for my patients that just because if you have children and their teacher told you that the range on the spelling test was 30 to 100, and your kid got a 30 or 40 or 50, I think that's still an F, isn't it? So of the physicians I know, at least 90+% go according to that range and say, if you're between 30 and 100, you're in the range, so you're okay. But you don't stop preventing cancer in these kind of conditions until your level is at least 65, which is the median or the middle point between 30 and 100. So all of the individuals who go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, your vitamin D is okay. You have to do a detailed investigation so that you can provide for yourself and your family a closer look at these facts. They told my wife her level was 34, so that was okay. 34 may help reduce infection, but it don't prevent breast cancer. So the proven level to prevent breast cancer is a higher level, and I encourage you to look that out for yourself. Why do older people have problems? The older you get, or if you're overweight, you can't process vitamin D as well. So that's one of the other reasons why older people are more likely to have a problem. And then, as was mentioned earlier, the underlying conditions like high blood pressure, smoking, heart disease, and we're going to get to something I didn't list, but the other lectures I talk about the endothelium as a major organ that's being overlooked. The endothelium are all the cells that line your arteries, including it lines your heart, kidneys, and other organs. So if this isn't working, the endothelium, that's the beginning of many different diseases that you call by the name of the organ. For an example, if you have low blood flow in an artery, the problem is with that artery, correct? So if that artery goes to the heart and clots off and stops blood flow, then we're going to call that a heart attack. So if our artery to the brain is clotted off, we call that a stroke. If it's to the liver, it's liver.
You're listening in on the phone?
And so we have to begin to think that
A few minutes ago, you didn't get it?
the inside of the arteries is about 6 tennis court size. It's huge. And that is the area that determines your blood flow and determines your nitric oxide. This is so important. I couldn't believe this when I first looked at it. The endothelium determines your blood pressure. I mention that because if you go to Linus Pauling, but let me just give you a quick idea how important it is. So if you use mouthwash on a regular basis, it kills the bacteria that's in the crypts of your tongue that produce nitric oxide. So the 3 doctors that got the Nobel Prize for discovering nitric oxide detailed how that determines what things are let into what organ or not let into your organ. It's like a signaling molecule. They call it a signaling molecule. And so any disease, you have to go back to the fundamentals, which is if you don't have blood flow, you're going to have a problem. So here on this website, you can see that the vascular endothelium refers to the inner lining of blood vessels, and it's a single layer of cells, and it's considered an active organ. When you go to the doctor, nobody checks on your endothelium. It is, I call it the most important organ that's not considered an organ. That's a whole picture in itself. When you talk about the endothelium, I would say at least 75–80% of people are deficient in magnesium. And so that further creates a problem. And, it's in certain foods, but what we're talking about is the micronutrients, such as vitamin D, magnesium, and there's several others, is the thing that is causing the person to be predisposed to getting the condition. Also, here's vitamin C. Very important. So I can't overemphasize the fact that anytime you get an infection, the first thing that drops is your vitamin C level. The vitamin C is an antioxidant, so it's neutralizing the oxygen species or the reactive oxygen species. And the way to think of it, I think, is that anybody here on this call who drives a car and it's a gasoline car, your car must produce exhaust. If it's not producing exhaust, your car is not working. And that's the same thing with each cell. It has to produce waste products. Part of that is the reactive oxygen species, or we call them also free radicals. So if the exhaust got into the passenger compartment and you were driving, pretty soon you'd probably pass out from carbon monoxide poisoning, right? Well, that's what happens when you don't have these nutrients and the endothelium is damaged. So all of this combined together, even though I mentioned the in the topic we were talking about what's the number one hormonal deficiency, and it is vitamin D. And just to put out, I guess, a bullet point that you should look up, vitamin D is actually a steroid hormone. It's not even a vitamin. So that, when they discovered it, it looked like a vitamin, but the more they looked into it, it's a secosteroid hormone that your skin makes in response to being exposed to the sun. So on my Sunday talks, I try to explain that your life depends on the sun. And before, we thought it was just plants through photosynthesis that we had to eat the plants, and then that was how we got energy from the sun. Now it's totally apparent that you directly need sunlight to have abundant life. And then, of course, the metaphysical comparison is, although we're talking about the SUN, what we really are reflecting is that it's the SON in you that is the cause of abundant life. And all of these different things are an aspect of how important things for your abundant life is in plants, in herbs, and how water is so important to the body. And so we have to, go back to taking in natural sources as opposed to, Walmart's synthetic vitamin C from China. So I can't emphasize enough that we need more fruit and vegetables according to the original good source. And the more research you do, the more you'll find that it's not very simple. Because, for an example, we all assume that organic is better than regular vegetables, right? So I did that for years. Come to find out, the lack of certain fertilizers, not the herbicides, but the lack of certain fertilizers, the organic food has like a third of the nutrients in some cases. So it's important to understand that for us to have our body as strong as possible to avoid not just this type of viral infection, but many other kinds of viral infections, we have to start with the foundation, and that is eating the right food, getting the right amount of sleep. I think fasting, meditation, and others. But before I get to that, I wanted to just run through and ask if there are any questions or things that need to be clarified.
If there are any questions for Dr. Thomas, you can type them in the chat window and we'll monitor that for you. And or just unmute yourself if you are muted and jump right in. We'll take just a few minutes here to see if there are any questions and get them answered.
So I'm scrolling through because one of the very important nutrients that I'd like to point out is that resveratrol is, primarily in red wine and grapes, a little bit in peanuts and berries, but it is again something that will strengthen your endometrium. I'm sorry, I always say that word. Endometrium is the lining of the uterus. We're talking about endothelium, which is the lining of your blood vessels. So we have proof of how important this is. I don't know if anybody's aware of the French paradox, but the French, in a manner of speaking, eat more greasy food and drink more alcohol than any other group in Europe, but they have less heart disease. And what they found was when they analyzed the wine and the grapes, that is resveratrol, that signaled their mitochondria and reverse the damage that ordinarily would occur with the high fatty food intake. But the whole point of it is it helps endothelium. So all of the things I'm trying to mention is to say, here are things that can, in addition to vitamin D, can help the endothelium, which is the organ that's damaged when people have what I call an excess negative response to infection. Part of that is endothelium. The other part is an overreactive immune system. I don't know. I was looking for, oh, here it is, chat window.
Yeah, the chat window, yes. There's can we take 60,000 IU vitamin D monthly or weekly supplementation? And how much is better? It says wine has a lot of pesticides given to grapes. Yeah, we don't promote alcohol in any form here, particularly, but resveratrol is definitely available as a supplement, right, Dr.?
Right.
Yes.
And the best way to look at it is not how much you take, but what level you want to get to. So if you do a blood test, quick example, I would say 80% of my patients who come and tell me their doctor put them on 50,000 once a week, but that's D2. So D2 is absorbed 15%. So 50,000 at 15% equals what? 7,500 IUs per week. So you thought you were getting a big dose with 50 or 60,000, but you're actually only getting 7,500 a week. I'd rather you take 5,000 IUs per day of D3, and that is going to equal 35,000 a week. So now you can compare 35,000 a week with 7,500. That's why every single study they did with D2, they used it. I mean, Scary, the study does not show any benefit because after 2 or 3 months, even though it goes up a little, it comes back down. So,
and I think that's a very important distinction, Dr. Thomas. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong. When traditional allopath physicians write a prescription for vitamin D, it is typically vitamin D2.
yes.
Okay. So what should a patient do in that case? Should they ask for a D3 if they don't really need a prescription for D3?
You can buy the D3 over the counter at various places.
Right.
300 or 400 tablets for under $12.
Yep.
How can we know our vitamin level? Is it through blood test?
Say that again?
Yeah, is the vitamin D3 level, how do we know the level? Is it through a blood test?
Yes. thermoset level, in my opinion, should be 65 nanograms per milliliter, and up to 100 is okay. So that's the goal. And a level of 35, like I said, if you looked at it as a spelling test, that's still an F. That's why monthly, I think this says 60,000 a month is never going to work. So the other way is I give certain patients IM vitamin D, like an emergency, so to speak. But I might give them 200,000. And some studies have shown like 600,000 IM per year. So it's a lot of different things, a lot of controversy. All of my colleagues would say that 35 is normal and tell the person you don't even have to take it anymore. I had a colleague who was an expert in that he was an endocrinologist, but the whole discussion has to change because we're not talking about bone health. So if we're talking about bone health, if your level is 20 nanograms per milliliter, that is got rid of rickets. How many here remember seeing when they were a kid, bow-legged kids? Does anybody remember that besides me? I realize I probably have some age.
I do. We studied about it in school as a major health issue when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what eventually you'll find, and we're talking about another 10 years, is that the list of vitamin D conditions will be staggering because breast cancer is a vitamin D deficiency state. Why do I say that? If your immune system is working properly and you have a few mutated cells and vitamin D gets rid of those cells, the vitamin D doesn't, it stimulates the immune system, and the immune system does it, then that's why it's at least 50% reduction in not only breast cancer, but also colon cancer. So if, you could go to your Google and put vitamin D and breast cancer, and you'll find plenty of articles that say low levels of vitamin D, high risk of breast cancer, has a role in controlling normal breast cells, and may be able to stop breast cancer cells from growing. So you can just Google that, and even on the first page, you're going to see it, time after time after time. And again, we're not saying the vitamin D goes around and kills cancer cells, but we have to look at the mechanism of action. It does, okay, all of your immune cells have vitamin D receptors, and they can process it from the vitamin D you take in to the active form. So it is so important that I think all the books should be rewritten. I'll give you one other anecdotal story. I probably can't pull it up, but I had asthma as a kid, and I recently found studies that prove my experience, which is by the time July came and you looked at my pictures, I was much darker than the Christmas pictures. Mm-hmm. And I asked the doctor when I was like 10 years old, I said, how come I don't have no asthma attacks after July 4th? And he's like, I don't know, maybe the grass changed or something. But I figured out later that my vitamin D, like anybody's, dropped as low as heck in the winter. And tremendously, the vitamin D level went up because back in that time, Mom would kicked the kids out at 8 in the morning after breakfast. Because she didn't want us in the house arguing over watching TV. So after a week or two of being in the sun for 6 to 8 hours, my vitamin D level had to, you can make 10,000 units of vitamin D in 10 minutes and 30,000 units of vitamin D if you're light skinned in a half hour. If you're dark skinned, it might take half a day. If you're really dark skinned, it might take 2 or 3 days. But you can make all the vitamin D you need, but they trick people by saying it causes cancer, skin cancer, but they never wanted to admit that the parabens that was in the sunscreen, that's really what caused the cancer. So I think that a balanced approach, where as I try to do, is look at the fact that there were some studies where they said there's no link, but most of the others showed us that there was a link between the vitamin D levels and the COVID-19 mortality rate. Always try to have a balanced view and look at both sides of the equation. And I think that will yield us the best scientific evidence, and then we can go from there. Because you have to have an anomaly that's visualized, then you can do a double-blind placebo-controlled study.
Right.
No advancement started out with a double-blind placebo-controlled high-level study. All of them started with someone observing something different. For an example, many of you may have heard penicillin was discovered the day after the guy came back from vacation, where he had thrown the bacteria cultures out. When he came back, they were still there because it was a holiday. And he noticed a ring around the mold where the bacteria would not grow. That's how penicillin was discovered. So an anomaly was discovered. Then they could do all of the research, investigation, and further. But it took a mind that was looking at something that was unusual, and then started a detailed investigation. So that's what I try to do. And
So,
yes.
Sorry, Dr. Thomas, we have a question in the chat window.
Okay.
The concern is anything taken continuously is not recommended. So can we take, in this case, I believe vitamin D3 1 month and then stop a month and then alternate it that way instead of getting tested regularly? And if we expose hands and feet, is that enough? So we don't get wrinkling on the face and so on.
Yeah. So how much exposure? Like I said, light skin, 10 minutes will generate 10,000 units.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying you need, 4, 6, 8 hours a day where the ultraviolet A damages your skin, damages the collagen under the skin, and that's what caused the wrinkles. In no way am I saying that. On the other hand, somewhat with tongue in cheek, I told some of my patients about that 50,000 once a week or so much once a month. I said, well, what if your doctor told you to breathe a whole lot on Monday and then you don't have to breathe till next Monday? So it depends on how the system is designed. So if your respiratory system is designed to constantly get oxygen, then I don't recommend, thinking you can get away with breathing. On the other hand, I absolutely think you can do meditation. You can control your breath. And there's a whole nother topic. Same thing with food. Up until recently, I would say, I wouldn't tell my patients they should eat on Monday and don't eat till next Monday.
Mm.
Your body designed to take food in on a regular basis. Now, recently, I went to a conference and studied with, these are the guys that train Olympic athletes, NFL, the Colorado women's volleyball team. So they're really high level, and they're using computers and science and oxygen use in the body to determine the science of it. And so after 30 years of study, they came out and said, you know what? If you fast, it turns on, I call it, for a simplified version, autophagy. Auto meaning auto or automatic. Phagy means eat. So they also call it autophagy. Your body will look for broken down proteins, unnecessary things in your body, and consume them. And after a day or two, your immune system, your stem cells are stimulated and become more active, and it removes the bad stuff so that a lot of allergies and other conditions are absolutely removed by fasting. So I no longer say that, because I do think at the very least, probably everybody should do intermittent fasting, and that is eat during the 8-hour window, like from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or 11 to 7. And then the rest of that day, only have water or nothing, like when you sleep. What does that do? That turns on the body's fat burning enzymes and reduces things like diabetes, type 1 and type 2. So the body has a way of healing itself, and sometimes not taking in food is helpful. Sometimes, doing a different breathing pattern is helpful. And as part of it, I recommend a healthy dose of each morning gratitude and forgiveness, because your state of mind determines how your immune cells work. Think of it like this. If your body is stressed out, then your body is ready to fight something, and you're going to have overreactive immune cells. So it might not be COVID, but it could be allergies. It could be your body overreacting. So when you reduce the amount, for an example, let's go back to sleep. So, of course, you're old enough, you grew up at a time where the TV actually went off. Unless you wanted to look at the test band signal and the beep or the beep sound, it's off. Now you can look at whatever you want, whenever you want. And so that overload makes it so the body is out of sync. So a whole nother discussion is the circadian rhythm, or the cell cycles that are being disrupted by the wrong kind of light, the wrong kind of input, the wrong signals that are coming into the body, and that sometimes fasting from that, or fasting from harsh words or bad attitude, can help your state of healing more than you would believe is possible. So although I'm circling around, because all of these things also affect the immune system, and it's so we talked about vitamin D. That's one thing, and in one of the slides it talks about the receptors are highly expressed in the B and T lymphocytes. That, as you know, if your lymphocytes aren't working, or they're immune deficiency disorder, then you could die from any infection. So it's very important to understand that we have a means of changing our health by, in this case, a supplement or a sun, and the different other supplements. I did want to mention one. It looks like that stuff. Oh, here you go. I mentioned that.
Oh, yeah.
So this may be over the top, but there's a thing called alpha lipoic acid.
Oh, yes. That's
And
very important. Very, very important.
it doesn't get the press that it should. Here it is. So if nothing else, look into how many different things, because COVID-19, the infection is just from my point of view, a jumping off state to say what new things do we need to know about creating the healthiest body that we can, so when the adversity comes, you can fend it off. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention lipoic acid. And it's a supplement that you can, get at the health food store, maybe even the grocery store for that matter.
And very inexpensive.
Yeah, and it's one of the most important things. I at a loss for words because it's a cofactor or assistant in critical steps in energy function, and it helps glucose uptake. And the number one, I think, disease that's totally overlooked is insulin resistance.
Yep.
And insulin resistance comes way before diabetes or any of these other conditions. So I'm trying to get my patients to start looking at the root cause. And it is so hard because I'm going to say it, stop eating fried food. The omega-6, which is damaged when you eat it, is also damaging the endothelium. And if the vascular endothelium in your heart is damaged, that's called heart disease. And one last thing I'm going to mention, and it's all of this is in the literature, but hypertrophic heart disease, that is heart disease where the fibroblasts have scarred the tissue in the heart, that happens because of lack of vitamin D. Another way of looking at it is this. We have, I like to ask a question like this. First, think about this. How old does your driver's license say you are? Then I want you to ask yourself, well, how old do you feel? So I'm just going to pick a number. Let's say I feel great. I feel like I was 25 years old and I'm over 60, right? Can you point out any cells, hair, nails, anything on your body that's like even 25 years old? No. There's no skin, there's no hair. There's almost nothing that equals your driver's license age. So just as a hint, your stem cells are needed for rejuvenation at all times. And every organ, every tissue at most is about 7 to 10 years old. So this regeneration, you can stop it. So you can turn stem cells off with just a little bit of mercury, aluminum, or herbicides or pesticides. So now you're going to have damaged cells reproducing damaged cells instead of stem cells reproducing normal cells, or what I want to call primordial cells or original cells. So I'm going to close with this because I tell the guys and the ladies for that matter that everybody is permanently pregnant. We're dependent upon these little baby stem cells. And to the extent you would want to keep your stem cells as active as possible, then you would want to, act like a pregnant woman and say, well, I'm going to eat very healthy. What we have is a failure to appreciate that the stem cells are responsible for rejuvenating every organ in your body, and there are ways to enhance it. Like I said, and there are ways for it not to work so well. So also want to open it back up if there are any questions. I went to the right and left of the topic because all of this has to do with endothelium, and that's what the vitamin D helps maintain in a healthy state as well as your immune system. And without it, your predisposition to having a bad reaction is worse and worse. And so we can bring things back within probably 2 or 3 weeks by taking enough vitamin D and some of the other supplements that I tried to review. And we have
Yes, we have another question in the chat window, Dr. Thomas, and I'm going to probably, after you answer that question, ask you just to revisit the Northern Hemisphere and where we are in the Chicagoland area, those of us that are in this part of the country, how we should factor in the exposure to sun, the beneficial exposure to sun in this part of the hemisphere. But this question right here is regarding diabetes and insulin resistance, and it sounds to me like the question is asking, is the real cause of diabetes insulin resistance as the only cause? And he would like, or this person would like some facts with regards to insulin resistance from fat and fat in the body, and how fatty liver and lack of exercise may also affect insulin resistance.
Sure. So I don't have a quick answer to it, but I'll mention it like this. When you exercise, they have proven that the muscles release what's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. That causes your brain to not atrophy. It actually stimulates your brain to make new connections. And neurogenesis, meaning your body can make new connections in the brain, is very important because as you get older, it's the hippocampus where your memories are stored that start to go. And if you do the exercise, if you have the right nutrients, within about 5 years or so, you actually can make new connection and restore your memory instead of what they're saying, oh, they have age, what do you call it?
Age-induced?
Yeah, it's like one of my patients, that got me so mad, it's getting me upset now. They did a CT scan and they said, oh, she has normal atrophy of her brain for her age. I'm like, where did they come up with stuff like this? And I guess the best way I can explain it is, you can have a car that's 30, 40 years old, but you kept that car in perfect condition. Or, like most of us, 20 or 30 years, that car's in a junkyard. But you can't say the car is supposed to or has to wear out and die off in 20 or 30 years. But the behavior of that guy that keeps his car perfect, he's cleaning and fixing it every day. You know, I barely get my car in for the 10,000 mile checkup, oil change. And it depends on how you approach the subject. So yes, exercise actually is medicine. Actually better than any drug that's ever been invented, because it was invented by the original physician, so to speak. Exercise, I can spend a year talking about how important exercise is, but at the same time, I know that when I get home and turn on the TV, eat dinner, and my wife says, hey, you want some popcorn while we watch a movie? My bad past habits, despite the fact that I know better, I might fall down that rabbit hole. And so I want to emphasize that. It's hard to I guess categorize it, but let me put you like this. Nitric oxide is so important that if you have a lack of it, then the oxygen is not able to get out of the hemoglobin cell where it's attached. And everybody knows that hemoglobin has oxygen and it travels around the body and then it's released where it needs to be released, right?
Yes.
I think in a plant is magnesium that's in its molecule, not iron.
The chlorophyll molecule.
There you go.
Yep.
So that is so important because no one's diagnosing you have a nitric oxide deficiency, but that's one of the most important signaling molecules ever. And without it, you then have inflammation. You now are going to get, in case people don't know, the average diet has about 60% carbs now. Your body has to do something with the carbs, and like type 2 diabetes and other things are inflammation. Beta cells are a problem. The muscles aren't taking the glucose up. That's a problem. It's a whole list, but before you get to that list, there's like 10 or 20 other things that they have discovered, and the nitric oxide releasing the oxygen. You probably heard on the news, the person walked in to the emergency room. He looks okay. They get their oxygen level and they're shocked because it should be like 90, 98. It's like 40. They can't believe the person is walking and talking, but there's something blocking the oxygen getting in. And if you block a nutrient, then those cells are going to start to degenerate. So we have so many different things that's been added. The herbicides and pesticides have been added. That causes a problem. Fructose is added to almost everything. And there's only one thing fructose can turn into, and that's triglyceride or a fat. And they have two different causes of fatty liver disease. One is alcoholic fatty liver disease, and the other is non-alcoholic liver disease. The non-alcoholic is caused by the fructose. They're drinking or eating too much, and that causes an increase in storage in the fat. And the alcohol is a sugar, in case you didn't know. So it is metabolized and also turned into a fat. So the other organ we can talk at a later time is the microbiome, the bacteria that's in your gut that produce products that's not in the food. So your body depends on the bacteria producing products in your gut. Just like I mentioned, your nitric oxide is dependent upon the bacteria in your tongue, reducing the nitrate into nitrite. And most of the foods don't have enough in it. So that's why depleting your nitric oxide producing ability is causing so many different problems. So, I predict in a few years, so many of these things are going to not only be released, but make it to public awareness that it'll be clear. For an example, the metalloproteins that are in your gut need zinc. And so if you're deficient in zinc, you're absorbing toxins that otherwise your body was designed to eliminate through the stool.
True.
And so it's so important because the ability of the body to deal with a toxin can be different from one person to another. So you just can't measure the toxin and say, hey, they have the same level and one has a problem and one doesn't. And so it can't be the toxin. No, it depends. If that toxin gets into the mitochondria and turns off your energy production, those cells are going to become senescent, meaning like not functioning. And those non-functioning cells release chemicals that makes the cells around them not function. And so it's a whole different science that will become part of our discussion. And I think the last thing I want to mention, and I don't think they're ever going to admit it, but the outbreak of the flu in October was preceded by thousands of people seroconverting, meaning they were exposed to the flu in May and June, but their body handled it and they never got sick. So when they checked the blood, the serum, they found all these people had this virus that we thought the flu just started in October, But actually, it was there. In other words, for years before there was any airplanes, the flu epidemic would start in France and the United States within 3 or 4 days of each other. It was impossible that was from one person bringing it to the next place. That was just simply impossible. And so when they wrote about it, they said it was some solar event that caused the flu to start in different geographical locations at the same time. They now know that solar event is what they call how low the sun is in the sky. In other words, how much vitamin D rays are being released. And they have to, at some point, they're going to argue is vitamin D, is not vitamin D. But at some point in the next, I say 5 years, their approach to food is medicine and medicine is food has to be totally overturned, because the science is going to prove, or it already is proven, it will be accepted that the approach has to change. And the very last thing I want to mention, for those who don't know, a lot of people know about chickenpox, right? So you get chickenpox as a kid, and most people or some people, it never comes back out. But if it does come back out, what do we call it when it comes back out?
Shingles.
Shingles. Where was the virus? Let's say you got it at 8 years old, it's coming back out at 68. Where was the virus for 60 years? Is this a reinfection? Did somebody give it to you? No, you have to understand the immune system can put things in check, but as you get older, your immune system's not working, it comes back out as shingles. And for those who don't know, shingles is very painful. It's painful because that virus was kept in check in the ganglion nerves, in the nerves. So the virus kind of went and hid in the nerves. The immune system wouldn't let it back out. But when it comes back out, it's a huge, huge problem. This is the problem that is being overlooked, because you have tremendous number of viruses in your body, a tremendous number, and they do not want to admit all of the diseases that are being caused by these different viruses. And when somebody brings it up, it's a huge, huge problem, because it upsets, the apple cart. It upsets, if you just do a detailed look into where the viruses come from, well, some of them you're injecting in your body. Some are coming because you're exposed to, other people that have it. It's huge. So I call those viruses, I call them the ghosts. So you have ghosts in your body, and as a joke, I say, well, when it first comes in, it's in control. It's like Casper the ghost with a C, Casper. It's a friendly ghost. It doesn't do anything. We know it's there. I draw a patient's blood and see that they have HSV or HPV or whatever different viruses in their body, but their health is not doing anything. But as soon as their immune system starts to fail, all sorts of things start happening. Mm-hmm. And now Casper turns into Killer Casper with a K, and it could be brain disorder, it could be the heart, it could be the liver, it could be the lungs. These viruses are held in check by our immune system. So it is so important to keep your immune system in check. And that's why you need what they call the micronutrients. And you need the biggest hidden factor is, I call it the something else category. What's the something else? Well, if you look at polyphenols, those are the substances that's in all plants, whether it's a flavonoid or curcumin or all these different things, they're under the category of polyphenol. The plants use it to defend themselves against bacteria and viruses, and humans use the same polyphenols. So all of the substances that make vegetables and fruit have all these different colors, like acrocyanin and some of these other different molecules. Those are the molecules your body needs to support the immune system. And the biggest deficiency in magnesium, I see somebody put a chat up there, is that it's no longer in the food. And you should eat more green leafy vegetables, but it's not in there that much. So back in the old days, they took the ash because they had wood burning stoves to cook or to heat the house, and the ash was put in the garden. What is the ash? It's magnesium or it's minerals.
Yeah.
So now you take the minerals out of the soil, you don't rotate the crops. The only thing you're concerned about is a big fruit that looks green. So you like Lawn, you come spray some stuff that makes it look good, but it's not actually as healthy as, you know, what grandma or great grandma used to have.
Right.
So back to the story, all of those individuals who used to work outside, who used to eat from the garden, who the only thing you had to drink was water because they didn't have pop and all that stuff 100, 200 years ago. Those people actually were healthier and you know, had a better immune system. So some advancements look like advancements, but they're not advancements.
So, Dr. Thomas, thank you so much. I just wanted to go back to the sunlight exposure in Northern Hemisphere and how that compares to the 10 minutes for lighter skin versus the darker skin for a day.
Yes, sir. In fact, that story can be highlighted. Everybody here knows the people from Senegal are very dark skinned. And when the Senegalese moved to Finland and Sweden because of civil war, famine, and all that stuff, the warlords, within 2 years, their cancer rate went up 10 times. Because people with that dark color skin cannot get enough vitamin D with that high latitude. So your skin color determines how much vitamin D is absorbed. You just have to be in the sun a little longer. And the lighter your skin, after 10 or 15 minutes, you should protect it, you know, with sunblock. I don't know if that answers the question, but the higher you go, the less ultraviolet B as in boy rays hit the surface, and that's what causes the vitamin D to form. And one last thing, ultraviolet C as in cat. I have devices I purchased, so I have them in my office. We run it through filters. That kills 100% of viruses, bacteria, and mold, ultraviolet C. But it's not enough in sunlight to kill any of it. I mean, if it was, there'd be no bacteria or viruses or anything, you know, on the earth if it was that strong.
Right.
So that's how I have I call it my COVID safe office. We kill all the bacteria, all the viruses in the air, and that's how the infection is spread. And I invite everybody to, you know, do some research and look up. MIT did a study in 2014 that showed the virus was spread in the air. Indoors, it could travel 100 to 200 feet. Indoors, it could go through the heating vent and go up to the 4th floor in like an office building that had air intakes, and they circulated the air all over the building. So it's unfortunate that that's not being considered, except there's one place where they're considering it, and it's remarkable. If you look up marijuana growing indoor facilities, they have ultraviolet C in their heating and air conditioning vents because it kills all the viruses and bacteria that was harming the plants. So they're making a lot more money by having less diseased plants. But for some reason, we have not figured out how to do this in schools for our kids, in public places, like at the airport. All these places should have something to kill the virus in the air. And, you know, I think it's clear to me, if you start out in January and February lying, saying, oh, it's not in the air, then it's more important for you to maintain that lie than to say, oh, we made a mistake. It was found in air vents in China in January. MIT did a study 2014 and 16 proving it's in the air. And, you know, they just came out 2 weeks ago, and it's like one blurb on the news, and that's it.
Wow. Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Thomas. This was an amazing review for us, and I just want to ask everyone to give you a virtual applause tonight for sharing this information with us. We have a The recording is going to be available. It's been on Facebook Live in our Facebook group for the first time. And just a wonderful opportunity for us to get together and review some of these things that we already know, but really and truly to be able to just give ourselves an opportunity to hear some of the later research that is available. We have just another minute left, and if there's a question, please put it in chat window. We'll forward this to Dr. Thomas and ask him to answer that question by email as he has an opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So I want to thank you all for coming out. Tonight we had as many as 15 people on our line. Not sure how many on Facebook and YouTube, but we're just wanting to do this. Our next date is going to be September 8th, and we will be looking for to hear from you regarding any topics of interest. We got a couple comments tonight on diabetes, and that is a very, very hot topic today. And we may consider that if anybody is particularly interested in that, please let us know what topics you have an interest in. Courtney Osborne is on the line with us, and we're going to ask him to close us out with a word of prayer.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to learn about your creation and how we can better take care of it. We thank you so much for Dr. Thomas taking the time out this evening to share with us. It has been very enlightening. We'd ask that you continue to bless him in his research and as he tries to help people. Lord, and bless us as we receive this information that we can apply it in our own lives and share it with others to make others healthy. Keep us all safe. We ask all these things in your son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Okay, have a good night, everybody. See you back September 8th. And let us know of any topics that you have an interest in. If not, we'll work on diabetes and other such. Have a good night.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We got a few topics in the chat window too.
Yeah, I put the topic for peristalsis.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. That's very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, peristalsis is a huge one, and that relates to the endothelium that Dr. Thomas was discussing tonight. So,
Okay.
yep, very good. All right. If you want to, you can send me privately your email address. I can get you some information in the meantime.
Yeah.
Okay, Latita is on. Good to hear from you, Latita. Okay, wonderful, Jacob. Thank you much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye.